Hi all, welcome. My name's Kim Stemshorn and I'm the program coordinator of the Smart Commute Toronto program at the City of Toronto. Today's webinar, titled Using Technology to Optimize Your Commute, is the second of the Smart Commute program's Fall Return to Office webinar series. Smart Commute's Return to Office campaign is designed to help Toronto employers and employees plan for a safe return to office. Through our website, smartcommutetoronto.ca, we are offering free resources to support return to office commutes. We'll start today's webinar with a land acknowledgement to respect the land that we walk, cycle, and take public transit on. We acknowledge the land we are meeting on today is the traditional territories of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. We will be recording this webinar for anyone interested in viewing it at a later date. Those who have registered will be sent a link to the recording of the webinar via email following, and it will be posted on our Live Green Toronto YouTube page. Smart Commute works with Toronto businesses to reduce traffic congestion and greenhouse gas emissions. Smart Commute offers tools and support to make it easier to carpool, cycle, walk, and take public transit. 36% of greenhouse gas emissions in Toronto are generated through transportation, with the majority attributed to personal vehicles. Smart Commute helps us work towards the ambitious goals of Toronto's climate action strategy, Transform TO. Whatever motivates your commute, perhaps it's fitness goals, achieving a faster commute, saving money or relying on public transit alone, or perhaps carpooling, there are many reasons why technology can help our commute. With this webinar titled Using Technology to Optimize Your Commute, we'll learn more about what resources are available to commuters. Throughout the presentation, I encourage everyone on this call to use the Q&A, the question and answer box in the WebEx interface. Should be on the right-hand side if you're using a computer. We've reserved the final part of the presentation, or this webinar rather, for the question and answer period. So if something in the presentation inspires you or needs further clarification, please feel free to detail it in the question and answer panel. I'm pleased to introduce you to our guest speaker today, Julia Hamill. Julia is a program manager for Smart Commute in North Toronto, where she supports commuters with customized transportation solutions. Julia brings over 5 years of experience working in research, cycling advocacy, and project development to the Smart Commute team. I'll pass things over to you, Julia. Take it away.
Great. Thanks for that introduction, Kim. I'm really excited to be here today to talk about how we can be using technology to optimize our commute. I'm just sharing my screen right now, so if you could give me a thumbs up to let me know that you can see that all right. All right. So as you mentioned, Kim, this webinar is part of Smart Commute Toronto's Return to Office campaign. Our goals are to reduce traffic congestion and related GHG emissions, and to connect workplaces and commuters with sustainable commute options. We offer resources and guidance to Toronto employers as part of the City of Toronto's climate action strategy. And today I'm going to be sharing, let's just go back a slide. I'm going to be sharing an overview of apps and technologies to plan your trips, including some tips and tricks with Google Maps, Triplinks, Smart Commute, Bikeshare Toronto, as well as some other alternatives like Rocketman, Transit, City Mapper, and Move It. I'll try to highlight certain accessibility features of different platforms and apps throughout our discussion, and we'll talk a bit about the benefits behind optimizing your commute. And I'll go over a few examples of how you can actually put some of these technologies into action in your day-to-day life. I'll end on a few tips for how to get started before we move into the Q&A period. So in Toronto, there are several transit options available, including the TTC subways, streetcars, and buses, as well as GO Transit and the Up Express. In addition to public transit, there's walking, cycling, carpooling, car shares, bike shares. When thinking about how to get from point A to B, the amount of options available might feel a little bit overwhelming sometimes. So what's the best way to weigh these options and choose a route that works for you? And how can we use technology to help us optimize this? I want to start with Google Maps, which is a great option for planning a route, and it's probably the one that many people are most familiar with. But there are a few tips and tricks to get even more out of Google Maps that you might not know about. First, you can avoid crowds on public transit by checking for live updates that predict how busy a subway station is. Underneath the station's name, you'll see a live busyness indicator, and you can tap on this to see popular times for every day of the week, which is a great tool to help you try and plan your travels outside of peak hours. You can also see real-time busyness indicators for buses when planning routes, where it'll say something like not too crowded or a little crowded. And this is also a great tool to use when thinking about how you want to get from A to B and what form of transit you're most comfortable with. You can also customize your public transit trip by changing your route options or preferred modes of transit. For example, you can choose to be only shown routes that use the train or the subway rather than the bus, or vice versa. You can also select multimodal trip options that connect public transit to driving options or rideshare services. And you can filter for routes that are wheelchair accessible, require less walking, or have fewer transfers. And on that note of accessibility, I just want to highlight that Google Maps is compatible with screen readers on both the desktop and the app version. You can also use some keyboard shortcuts to make it more accessible on a desktop, and you can change the font and display size on your app to make it a little bit easier to read. For more help planning your cycling routes, you can click on the layers icon and select cycling. The map will show you roads with cycling infrastructure, including trails, dedicated lanes, bike-friendly streets, and unpaved trails. You can also use the Google Maps directions function to get cycling directions that will usually take you on bike paths and quieter streets whenever possible. On the mobile app, another great option is that you can see Bikeshare Toronto cycling options. It'll show you not only where the Bikeshare docks are located, but also how many bikes are currently available and how you can walk from where you are to the nearest Bikeshare station. So that's a great tool as well that can come in really handy. The next tool that I'd like to share is a new resource that can help you plan your routes called the Smart Commute tool. This is available at smartcommute.ca or as a free app for Android and iPhone users. You can input your start and end points, and the Smart Commute tool will find the best walking, cycling, carpooling, and transit options for you, including directions, the estimated time required, and an estimated carbon footprint of each mode of travel. Now, compared to Google Maps, I find this tool is particularly useful as a way to help you find carpooling partners or drivers, as well as people from your workplace to walk or bike with if you want to commute together. If you live far away from a transit route or your workplace is in an industrial area, you might want to consider combining carpooling with transit or just carpooling on its own at either end of your commute to make it a little bit easier. You can also really easily log your trips using the Smart Commute tool, which I'll talk a little about more when I give a demo of it later on in our presentation. Now, the next tool I want to talk about is called Triplinks, and this is the official trip planner and transformation information resource for the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area. You can access Triplinks through the Smart Commute tool or at triplinks.ca. And there's also a Triplinks app available for iPhone and Android. This trip planner is really easy to use. Like Google Maps, you're just entering where you're starting from and where you want to go, and it'll tell you how to get there by public transit or by a mix of transit and cycling, walking, or driving. You can also use Triplinks to find schedule, fare, and other information to help make traveling around the region a little bit easier. And the Triplinks website was designed to be accessible to the widest possible audience, corresponding with guidelines established by the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. It's got a really strong color contrast for easier reading, and it does offer that screen reader navigation, as well as information about paratransit providers. I think the best part about the Triplinks trip planner is that you can customize your trip plan using a variety of preferences. including the distance you're willing to walk or cycle and the speed at which you walk. So this is a little bit more customizable than Google Maps, for example. And it can easily help you to incorporate more walking or cycling into your commute at a way that works for you. So for example, you can set the distance that you're willing to walk and your walking speed, and Triplinks will show you what it thinks the best option is. Similarly, if you would like to bike for part of your trip and take transit the rest of the way, Triplinks allows you to set how far you're willing to bike, and then it'll suggest routes that combine cycling and transit. You can also indicate if you want to take your bike with you on transit, and if you prefer to take streets with cycling infrastructure. And once again, this is a really great option if you do live in an area with maybe less frequent transit connections, or if part of your trip is less bikeable than the rest, or even if you just want to start getting a little bit more exercise, but you're not ready to commit to doing your whole trip by bike. Speaking of bikes, Bikeshare Toronto does offer 24/7 convenient access to almost 7,000 bikes and 625 stations across Toronto. It's designed to allow users to make short trips around town. So the bikes can be borrowed from any docking station in the Bikeshare system on either 30 or 45-minute trips, and then return to any docking station in the network. This is another great first or last mile solution for your commute. For example, if your workplace is farther from a subway station, you can consider using Bikeshare to ride to the station or to ride to your workplace rather than taking a bus. And that way you also don't have to worry about finding somewhere to lock up your own bike and leaving it there during the day. You can access Bikeshare Toronto on the go with the PBSC app. And whether you're a member or a pass holder, you can find station locations, track bike inventory, locate available docks, and unlock bikes in real time. You can also use other apps like Google Maps or Transit and City Mapper, which I'll talk about pretty soon, in order to find a bike share station and see how many bikes are available. Once you get to the station, you can use the kiosk to unlock a bike. And if you have an annual membership, you can also get a Bikeshare key that you can use to unlock bikes. So there's lots of options of how you can make Bikeshare work for you. As part of Smart Commute Toronto's Return to Office campaign, Bikeshare Toronto is offering Smart Commute workplaces a corporate discount of 25% on annual memberships purchased before December 31st of 2021. So this is a really great deal, and for more information, you can check out smartcommutetoronto.ca for information about how you can sign up your workplace or your organization for that. And we'll be sharing some of those details in our post-webinar follow-up as well. Finally, I just want to go through some of the free mobile apps that are available to make transit easier to use and offer some more accessible information about travel options, routes, and times. Some of the benefits of these apps are that they're all free and they are able to show you the next bus information, which eliminates uncertainty of when the bus will come and lets you wait indoors until the transit service is actually close by, which is pretty important as we're heading into winter and colder weather. You don't want to be standing outside wondering when your bus or your streetcar is going to come. So TTC has also partnered with the transit trip planning mobile apps Rocketman and Transit, which you can see here on the left side of my screen, in order to provide real-time bus occupancy information to help customers plan and take their trips. Customers are able to see the volume of passengers on vehicles approaching their stops to help choose which vehicle they're most comfortable boarding. And Rocketman is a Canadian-built transit app where you can see real-time bus schedules, track your streetcar along its route, save your favorite stops, and get real-time transit delay alerts so that you're not left waiting. Rocketman doesn't currently offer Bikeshare locations, but this feature is coming soon. You can also schedule multiple reminders to tell you when your bus arrives. And it's worth noting that this app does require internet connection, so that's something to keep in mind if you don't have access to mobile data. Transit app also offers accurate real-time predictions, simple trip planning, step-by-step navigation, service disruption notifications, and departure and stop reminders. And it's all presented in a really clear, bold interface. Transit includes integrated Uber, Bikeshare, and car share information, even including how close the nearest Uber driver is to you if you needed to connect your transit trip to an Uber ride on the other end. And the transit app supports screen readers and also ensures that all text meets web content accessibility guidelines as far as contrast standards go. The next app on my screen here is called City Mapper, and City Mapper contains information on transit routes, Bikeshare, and Uber, and it also offers that map view. Similarly to Rocketman and Transit, it does offer some trip planning, and City Mapper also includes offline map functionality, so you can download part of the map to use without mobile data if that's important for you. Depending on your route, City Mapper can also tell you the best entrance to use when taking the subway, which can save you a little bit of time and make your trip more efficient. And another neat feature of City Mapper is that you can also switch your walking routes to prioritize main roads. For instance, if you're walking somewhere late at night and you wanted to stick to well-lit main streets instead of walking on a side road, it'll give you that option, and that can also just help make navigation a little bit more simple. Finally, Move It on the right here is another app that offers real-time trip planning, get-off alerts, information about nearby stations, platforms, and schedules, service alerts, and some offline map functionality. Like Transit and City Mapper, you can also see bike routes and docking station info. And from an accessibility standpoint, Move It has optimized every screen across the app for voiceover and talkback screen reading technologies. So these are just a few of the apps out there, and they all have some similar features, but they're also all a little bit different in terms of the interface that they use and the features that they do offer. So I definitely recommend playing around with some of them and seeing which one works the best for you and which one you find easiest to use. So this has been like a pretty quick overview of a whole bunch of technologies that are out there to help you optimize your commute. And at this point, you might be wondering, why does optimizing your commute matter? What's wrong with, commuting the way that you're already commuting? And I would say that all of these technologies are great tools to help easily integrate multiple forms of transportation into your trips, especially for the first last mile, the beginning or end of a trip made primarily by public transportation, which can often be the hardest part of the trip. So these technologies can help make accessing public transportation more convenient and comfortable, and they might help you discover different ways of traveling or experiment with a new form of active or public transportation that you haven't tried before. Multimodal trips that incorporate active and public transportation come with so many benefits, including those to your health and quality of life. Walking, cycling, carpooling, and taking public transit instead of driving alone can decrease stress and anxiety, improve back and neck pain, and increase the amount of physical activity you're getting. When you're driving alone, your attention is occupied and you're not actually able to use that time for anything other than driving. So by taking transit, you're free to engage in other tasks like reading or catching up on sleep, and active transportation helps integrate exercise into your life without needing to make extra time for the gym. Multimodal transportation is also so key in terms of reducing congestion, which we all know, congestion in Toronto is a big problem. When you're incorporating more active and public transportation into your trip, you're helping to take cars off of the road, which helps our city move more efficiently, decreases travel delays, and decreases the chance of vehicle collisions, which is a win-win for everybody. Lastly, optimizing your commute is a great way to help you play your part in contributing to Toronto's climate action goals. Transform TO, Toronto's climate action strategy, is working to reduce local greenhouse gas emissions and improve our health, grow our economy, and improve social equity. As part of this strategy, by 2050, the goal is for 100% of transportation options in Toronto, including public transit and personal vehicles, to use low or zero carbon energy sources, and 75% of trips under 5K to be walked or cycled. So these apps are a great way to help us all work towards those goals. Now, I've covered a bunch of different apps and technologies, but what does it actually look like to put them into action, and how can you use them in your daily life? Let's go through a few examples of what this might look like. First, let's say maybe you live near York Mills and you're regularly commuting by subway to downtown Toronto near Queen Station, which you can see on the map here. This is already a great way to help reduce traffic congestion, save money on gas, and improve your health by reducing the stress of driving. But can we make this commute even better? Maybe you're looking to incorporate more physical activity into your day-to-day life, but it's hard to find time during a busy week. Mixing active and public transportation is a really good way to put your commute to work for you. So this is an example I borrowed from a colleague who's done this, but consider getting off the subway a little bit earlier and then using Bikeshare to cycle the rest of the way. During the above ground portion of your subway ride, you can use an app like Google Maps to plan a route by Bikeshare and even check to confirm that there are bikes available. If you're on the subway and you see that there are no bikes available at the dock you want to go to, not a problem. You can just stay on the subway and finish your ride as you would normally. But if there are bikes available, then you can get off the subway and use your phone to unlock one of those bikes and take it the rest of the way. In this example, getting off the subway at Wellesley Station and taking a bike the rest of the way would not only allow you to get a bit of extra physical activity and fresh air, but it can also make your commute a few minutes quicker, since cycling is actually more direct than the subway and it takes you right to your office. For another example, let's say that you live a little bit further out, maybe in Oakville, and driving to your office in downtown Toronto each morning could take up to an hour and a half each way, and that's not even counting parking. Using Triplinks, you can look at options for cycling or driving to the GO station nearest to you, and then make the rest of your journey by public transit. And I'm just going to switch the screen that I'm sharing now so that we can go to the Triplinks site, and I will give you an example of what this looks like. So Kim, can you give me a thumbs up that you're looking at the Triplinks screen right now? Awesome. So as you can see here, this is Triplinks' trip planner, and I'm going to enter in my starting point, which for here, we're going to say I'm starting by Morden Park in Oakville, and I'm going to 80 Bloor Street in Toronto. And let's suppose I want to go there for work, and I want to get there tomorrow, arriving at 9 in the morning. Now, when I hit plan trip, Triplinks is just going to give us the basic public transit options available, and then we'll look at how we could customize this. So you can see here on my screen, it's given me a few different options. The fastest one takes about an hour and 20 minutes, and we would be taking a bus to the GO station, taking the GO, and then transferring to line 1 in order to get to my office. And it'll show you a map here as well. So you can kind of have an idea of where you're coming from here in Oakville and where you're heading in Toronto. But if I want to optimize this, what I'm going to do is go over here and hit modify. And I'm going to look at some of my options, which are available up here at the top beside start and end. So I'd like to look at what my options might be like if I went for a multimodal trip, going using cycling and public transportation. I can ask for the fastest or the fewest transfers. So I think I'm going to go with the fastest for now. And then I can also look at my cycling options. In this case, I don't think I want to take my bike on public transit, but I also think that 10 kilometers might be a little too far for me. So I'm going to tone that down. I'm going to say I'm only willing to bike 5 kilometers. And I'd feel more comfortable biking on a bike network as well. Once I've kind of input my options there, I can hit plan trip again, and Triplinks will come back to me with some more options. And you can see here, it's given me one that involves about a 3-kilometer bike ride to the GO station. So that's about 15 minutes of cycling. And then from there, the rest of my trip will look the same as it did previously. I'll be getting on the GO train and then transferring to line 1 on the subway. And this is pretty neat because, as you can see, I've actually saved a bit of time. I've saved about 15 minutes. And in addition to that, I'm also getting in 15 minutes of exercise in my morning on my way to work without having to add any extra time to my commute. So that's one example of how you can be using Triplinks to optimize your commute, potentially saving some time and also just kind of mixing things up a little bit so that you get to do something different in your commute and get some activity instead of the same old thing every day. Next, another way to optimize your commute, and I'm going to switch over to the Smart Commute dashboard for this and show you the Smart Commute tool. Another way to optimize your commute is by carpooling. Carpooling can be a really cost-effective, easy-to-adapt option with flexible options for both drivers and passengers. Carpooling with the same individuals each time, either people from your household or workplace, if that's possible, as well as wearing a mask at all times while inside the vehicle, can help mitigate COVID-19 safety concerns about carpooling. And we've got some information about that on the Smart Commute Toronto website, where you can download a resource about carpooling safely with respect to COVID concerns. But I just want to show you a little example here of how you might use the Smart Commute tool to make a trip from your home in Mississauga to your workplace up in Vaughan. I've actually logged into my own Smart Commute account here, so we're logged into my profile, and I can show you here in my profile, I've input my trip profile. And this is where you can put in maybe regular trips that you make, for example, your commute. So I've saved my commute details here from my home in Mississauga to my workplace at the City of Vaughan City Hall. And I've also put in some information about what days of the week I'm usually commuting, my preferred modes of transportation, and other details like that. So this is saved into my profile, and when I go to the trip planner, those details are already input, so I don't need to worry about typing them in every time. Smart Commute tool has got that there for me. So now I can click search, and I can look at my different commute options for my commute, and it'll show me different options for finding carpool drivers, passengers, cycling or walking partners. It's giving me a walking option to get to work, but in this case, you probably won't choose that unless you're feeling really adventurous. But I've also got some public transit options here, different public transit routes I could take. And what I want to focus on today is looking at carpooling and carpooling drivers and partners. So you can see here, the Smart Commute tool has come up with a potential carpool driver for me, as well as a few people who might be interested in being carpool passengers. The map will show you where people are starting from and where they're going to, so that can help you figure out if it actually makes sense for you to carpool together, and if there's a good meeting point or drop-off where you can coordinate that. Another great thing about the Smart Commute tool is that you can go to Advanced Search over here, and you can select to only search within users who are from your workplace if you're part of a Smart Commute workplace. So in that case, I can select to only search within the City of Vaughan for carpooling partners or drivers. And this can be just a great way to find people from your workplace who you might not know already, but who might be traveling similar distances as you or starting at the same location. So you can see here, I can connect with John and contact him about maybe meeting up, having a coffee together, and talking about whether or not we want to carpool together. And it's always great to meet up with someone before you decide to carpool and just go over the ground rules and expectations for your trip. But the Smart Commute tool is a great way to just connect you to other people out there who might be interested in carpooling. So that's a really quick overview of the Smart Commute tool and how you can use that in terms of carpooling or finding a carpool partner. Before we go back to the presentation, I just want to also show you a little bit about logging your trips with the Smart Commute tool. You can do that either on the mobile version or on the desktop. So if you're on the go, you can do it while you're sitting on the bus, and it's a pretty similar interface to use. On the web version, you just go over to Commute Calendar, and you can see here that I've been putting in some of my commute information from November. There's options for, remote work. I've been working from home, so I don't actually have a commute, but that is a way to log the fact that I'm saving money and reducing my greenhouse gas emissions because I'm not commuting anywhere. And the really great thing about using this to log your trips is that you can save trips that you take most often. So if you take the bus frequently at the same time to get to work, you can save it as part of my saved trips, and then logging that trip is just as easy as dragging and dropping it onto the calendar. And that's logged your trip for you. The commute tracker will give you some information about the number of trips you've logged, kilometers traveled, the greenhouse gas emissions that you've saved, as well as a kind of estimate of how much money you may have saved compared to driving alone. So this is a really great tool. Definitely recommend checking it out. And yeah, that was a pretty brief overview of it, but you can also connect some apps to the tool to help you log your walking trips or biking trips. And that can also help make logging a little bit more easy. So I'll go back to my presentation now and we'll finish that up. Should be back on the screen. So we've gone over looking for carpool partners, finding carpool partners, and yeah, to finish, we've covered a bunch of different technologies in this presentation, and I know it's been pretty quick going through them. But the one thing that I want you to take away from this presentation is that using technology to optimize your commute really doesn't need to be complicated or confusing. The best way to get started is just to start small, pick one tool or technology we've discussed here today, and give it a try for a month. See what you think, see if you can use it to make your commute a little bit better. It's also great to invite a friend or a colleague to try it out with you, rather. They might have tips or tricks of their own to share, or you can help each other figure it out together. And I know even just talking about different apps with my colleagues while I was putting this presentation together, I learned a few things that I didn't know before as well. Finally, I just want to say that practice does make it easier. Using a new tool might sometimes feel a little bit intimidating or confusing at first, but it soon becomes part of your routine, and I can definitely attest to that as well. With that, I'm excited to hear what questions you might have about using technology to optimize your commute. So I'm going to pass it back to Kim to start our Q&A.
Thanks so much, Julia. So much information and resources on wayfinding and trip planning in that presentation. I definitely learned a lot. I'm looking forward to integrating some of these to enhance my commute. So we'll take the remainder of the webinar for questions and answers. We have Julie on the line here to provide her expertise. So I encourage all of our attendees to use the Q&A panel within WebEx. Enter your questions in, and we'll be happy to answer them. So maybe to start, you mentioned try an app for a month. Just dip a toe in, get a sense of it. Do you have, from your experience, what sorts of things sort of click with you when you use apps? Like what features do you like in an app?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kim, and it really depends on what you want to use it for and how you commute. For me personally, I like to cycle a lot, so I use Google Maps cycling directions almost every day, probably. One feature that I didn't mention in the presentation that I find particularly useful is that if you're looking at bike directions somewhere, Google Maps can actually tell you the elevation of your route. So that's a good way to know, if you have to go up a big hill, maybe you can find an alternate route that's a little bit longer, but a little bit flatter. And that's something that I find really helpful. The other feature that I found to be a total game changer for me is live updates about when a bus is coming. I know when I was a teenager, I remember just waiting for the bus and having no idea, did it already come? Did I miss it? Is it still coming? You're standing there, you have no idea. And having an app that can give you, live updates about when the bus is coming and how far away it is really makes it a totally different experience taking public transit. So that's something that's been really helpful for me.
Yeah, I love that point. It's all about anticipating any heartbreak moments or disruptions to one's trip. So yeah, being able to anticipate this stuff and plan ahead really, at least I know from my experience, has enhanced my commute. So great suggestion. Yeah, and on that note, yeah, how, from your experience in trip planning and your vast knowledge and all these amazing apps that we have at our fingertips, do you, what are some tips you can provide our attendees on, like how we can anticipate for those heartbreak moments, for those unexpected conditions, like whether it might be weather, it might be, a transit delay, could be an accident or collision in the streets. What are some of your favorite features? And if you could mention the app so we can, if you can.
Yeah, for sure. So I think if you have mobile data, definitely any of the apps I mentioned, like Rocketman, Transit, Google Maps, City Mapper, they can help you kind of adapt your trip on the fly based on the information as it's changing. I know I've had experiences before where the subway's been shut down and maybe that's totally changed the trip that I had planned. That's a pretty rare thing to happen, but once in a while it does happen. And it's great to be able to be prepared and to be able to pull out your phone. And for instance, in that case, I used Google Maps and I searched for a trip where my options I selected only using the subway or the bus, so that Google Maps wouldn't be giving me, only using the streetcar or the bus so that I wouldn't be getting subway directions. Similarly, if you don't have mobile data, that's where some of these apps like City Mapper can really come into play, where you can download that information in advance and have it on hand so that if you need to adapt your trip, you can. I also think Bikeshare Toronto is a great resource if you need to maybe adapt your trip due to weather or delays, because it offers you that other option of you're not just stuck, you have a way to get somewhere, and you can use that app to figure out where the Bikeshare dock is and how many bikes are available. And if you have any tips as well, Kim, of things that you've used, definitely feel free to share them with us as well.
Yeah, thanks, Julia. Your last mention and shout out to Bikeshare Toronto. I guess it was, time is so hard to track these days, but at the beginning of 2020, I was gifted a Bikeshare Toronto membership. For those of you who are looking for Christmas gifts, it's about $100 for a year-long membership. So you can give someone the gift of sustainable mobility. But I was gifted it because I had mentioned that I was hesitant to bike throughout the winter months. And Bikeshare Toronto provides the ultimate freedom of biking one way and the option to cycle on the way back, maybe not, maybe you'll take transit. So yeah, I love the mention of Bikeshare Toronto. It's such a great system we have in Toronto, and we're very lucky to have such a robust system.
Absolutely, and I think that's a great point about, you have the option to only go one way, and then if it's raining on your way home, you don't have to bike back. So it does give you a lot of freedom in that sense.
Yeah, and for those, I believe for those riding just a one-way trip rather than a membership, it's the same cost as transit.
I believe so, yeah.
Terrific. Apologies. You mentioned in your presentation that you talked extensively to multimodal trips. Can you provide any tips for people to embrace multimodal options? That's more than one mode of transport.
Yeah, so tips for how to embrace multimodal transportation. That's a great question. And again, I think it's something, to start slow with and try to have some fun playing around with, whether that's incorporating cycling in to make getting to a public transit station easier. That can be huge because, as we know, sometimes getting from your house or your apartment to the transit station is the hardest part of the trip. So multimodal transportation is a great way to make that easier, whether you're going to bike or take an Uber or drive and then park your car at a carpool lot or a GO station and take public transit the rest of the trip. That can really, really open up different options for you.
That's great. We received a question actually about sort of related to our multimodal discussion here, but this attendee is thinking of biking more. Is there any info where one can provide options for a safer and more secure lockup for one's bike? And then some additional questions. Is there any info around theft on bikes throughout Toronto? This person just mentions that they would feel more inclined to cycle if they had some of these options available to them or awareness.
For sure, and I know that locking up a bike can be a big concern, knowing that you have somewhere safe to lock your bike during the day. This is a great question, and it really depends on the area that you're cycling. I know certain GO stations will have like secure bike lockups where there might be a room that you can lock your bike in, which is a great option. If you can encourage your employer to offer bike parking or bike infrastructure, that's also a great place to lock a bike, and something that the Smart Commute program could potentially be working with workplaces to help provide their employees. And that's a huge incentive to increase cycling as well, knowing that you can bring your bike into your workplace during the day. In terms of thinking about where to safely lock up a bike, just when you're on the go out in the city, definitely investing in a good quality lock is something that I always recommend. Having a U-lock and ideally a cable that can also loop through your wheels as well is a good preventative measure to decrease theft. And then thinking about, how secure is this thing that I'm locking my bike to? Is it something that could easily be dismantled? Yeah, lots of things to consider, and there are resources out there that can help you figure out like how to lock your bike safely that we could definitely share after the webinar.
That's a great idea. We can definitely include that in our follow-up email. I'll just speak from the City of Toronto's perspective. There's a bike locker program at the City of Toronto. So for as low as $10 a month, you can have access to a locker that is yours and yours alone. And you have a lock and key. So it's a great feature because your bike is not visible to everyone out there. So they don't know what's in there. So yeah, you can look that up on the City of Toronto's website. There's also a number of bike stations around Toronto. So there's definitely one at City Hall and Union Station, and I believe Finch Station as well. These memberships are a bit higher in cost, but it's a space that's for those parking their bikes, and it's monitored around the clock. So that's another great resource for our cyclists out there who are concerned about bike theft. And we received another question asking about, can you speak to bringing your bike on public transit? What are commuters' options there?
Yeah, absolutely. So for instance, on GO buses and GO trains, you can bring your bike onto them. So you can bring your bike anywhere that a GO bus goes. They each carry up to 2 bicycles, and trains are bike friendly as well. The exception to this is that you cannot bring your bike on the GO train during rush hour. So yeah, avoiding those peak hours is another great way to plan your routes if you want to be bringing your bike on the train. If you're able to take your trip outside peak hours, that is possible. If you're traveling in the opposite direction during rush hour, though, you can bring your bike on the train. So if everybody's heading downtown and you're heading away from downtown, you will be able to bring your bike on the GO train. And I believe it's similar, you can confirm for me as well, Kim, on TTC, you cannot bring your bike on during peak hours, and that's just because it's so busy in the station. We want to be able to keep people moving through quickly.
Yes, that's absolutely right. I think you can bring they make foldable bikes. So that's bikes that can actually have moving parts that will, reduce the size taken up. So I believe you can bring those on Go Transit and TTC. So for those of us with fancy wheels. Can you provide any tips, Julia, on interregional travel? So for instance, lots of folks have moved further away, or maybe they lived further away to begin with. But yeah, so for instance, traveling from Toronto to St. Catharines or vice versa. And yeah, if you could comment on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually used to live in St. Catharines, so I'm familiar with planning trips interregionally for sure. I would say Triplinks actually does work within the whole region, so you can use Triplinks to plan trips from Toronto as far as Niagara Falls, and it'll give you some options for that as well. I've also used Google Maps quite a bit in order to figure out, you know, how to get between St. Catharines and Toronto, so that's another great option as well. I do believe some of the other apps that I've mentioned would work for this too, but I would have to confirm that they work across the whole region.
And maybe this is a good opportunity to plug the importance of carpooling for those longer trips too. Save money on transit, you know, pass the time better with friends and good conversation.
Yes, definitely, especially when, you know, go train frequency might be a little less frequent to some of these regions. If you're able to carpool all of the way, or carpool to, you know, a station like Burlington Go and then park there, that's a great use of multimodal transportation.
I loved all the options that the Smart Commute tool offers to commuters. So many safeguards in there for, you know, finding the right commute partner and only providing as much information that is communicating on the app rather than, you know, having to give someone your telephone number or you know, contact information. Do you have any advice for those that are looking to take up carpooling to maybe address the longer commute?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, Kim, there are some of these personal safeguards built into the Smart Commute tool that can make it a little bit easier. On the tool, you can set filters as well for, you know, if you're smoking or non-smoking, depending on what you're comfortable, you know, sharing a car with. And, you know, as we discussed and that I've shown you, you can choose to search for carpooling partners who are from your workplace, which does offer a little bit more familiarity and security, especially if you're just starting out carpooling. If you're feeling a little bit nervous of it, this is a great place to start. And in all cases, I recommend, you know, grabbing a coffee and getting to know the person before you actually take a trip together. It's a good way to determine if it's a good match for both of you and if it's something that's going to work before it's 8 a.m. and you're sitting in traffic on your way to work. So talk with me a little bit about the ground rules and expectations that you have in terms of, you know, when you're going to meet up, where you're going to meet up, what your policies are in terms of lateness, any policies you have about making stops along the way home. You really want to make sure that you discuss things openly just so that you're both on the same page. And that can help make the ride stress-free for sure. And as well, if you're just new to starting out carpooling, you don't need to commit to doing it every single day right from the beginning. You might decide, you know, you'll try it once or you'll try it one day a week, and you can evaluate and adjust as you go. So that's how I would get started with carpooling.
Those are great tips. Especially encouraging people to be good communicators too, and to be on the same level with each other. Really, really great communication tips. We have someone inquiring about the Smart Commute's emergency ride home program. What a great feature, specifically for Smart Commute clients. Could you speak to it?
Yeah, that is a great question. Really glad someone brought that up. So the Emergency Ride Home program is part of the Smart Commute program for Smart Commute workplaces. And the way that it works is that if you commuted to work in a sustainable way and you have an emergency come up during the day that you're not able to travel home by the same method, The Smart Commute program will offer up to $75 to reimburse you for your trip. For instance, if you have an emergency, your child is sick and you need to go pick them up, and you carpool to work in the morning and you were planning on carpooling back home, obviously you're not going to be able to carpool to go pick your child up, but you can use the emergency ride home program to take an Uber to pick up your child and get home, and then you'll be able to submit that expense and be reimbursed for it after the fact. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's terrific. And can you maybe provide some more information on if there's anyone on this call that's employer isn't a Smart Commute client, how they can go about becoming one and joining the program?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's another great question. I would recommend you visit the Smart Commute Toronto webpage. You can send us an email and we'll connect with you. Based on where you're located in the city, we'll make sure we connect you with the right Smart Commute office to talk a little bit more about what Smart Commute can offer to your workplace and how we can help your employees.
Thanks, Julia. So I think that just about wraps up our webinar here. It's been such an amazing experience to learn about wayfinding and to get a better understanding of how we can all sort of start thinking about our commutes back into the office. Thank you all attendees for attending this webinar. A big thank you to Julia for this amazing presentation and bringing all your knowledge and experiences to this webinar today. Additional thank yous go to our behind the scenes team who are helping out. You didn't hear them on this webinar, but they're there working hard. Tamara, Michael, and Sanjay, big thank you to y'all. A recording of this webinar will be sent via email to all those that have registered for this event. We'll also post this webinar to the Live Green Toronto YouTube page for additional viewing. Our next Return to Office webinar will be held on Tuesday, November 30th from 1 to 2 p.m., so just a few weeks away. We'll learn more about alternative work arrangements such as hoteling and hot desking. So to register for this webinar and to learn more about the future webinars in this series, visit smartcommutetoronto.ca. So just a refresher, Smart Commute works with Toronto businesses to reduce traffic congestion and greenhouse gas emissions. And we're working hard to achieve the goals of our climate action strategy in Toronto called Transform TO. Thank you all for joining us today and have a great day. Bye.